Good morning, friends and colleagues. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Smart Buildings Exchange. My name is Kerry Meade, and I'm the Executive Director of the Smart Building Center. The Smart Building Center is a nonprofit organization located in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Seattle. We launched in 2017 through the collective efforts of several Seattle area business leaders. And over the last 5 years, we've grown from our roots in the local community to hosting regular events online and in person that attract an audience from across the globe. Our growth comes from our partner businesses and their tireless efforts to accelerate adoption of smart building practices and technologies, our small but passionate and dedicated staff, and from the growing need and desire for smarter buildings that fuel productive workplaces, cut carbon emissions, enable grid interactive eco-districts, and promote our overall health and well-being. This is our second Smart Buildings Exchange. Our first conference launched last year, and this year we're excited to come together with all of you both virtually and in a hybrid manner. Our conference program will extend across 3 days with 2 days of virtual only sessions before concluding on our third day with a hybrid panel discussion, for which some of you will be convening with us in person, while others will tune in virtually. With over 40 speakers in 10 sessions and a live streamed hybrid panel discussion and lunch, we are excited to share the next 3 days with you. We're kicking off the conference momentarily with a keynote discussion from Darlene Pope, the president of Planon North America, where she will speak on the market opportunity for smart buildings and their compelling financial and business sense. After which we will adjourn to sponsored breakout rooms where you can turn on your camera and interact with one another. The day will continue with concurrent discussions on grid interactive efficient buildings featuring 2 case studies, followed by a moderated panel discussion, and a discussion of building systems interoperability challenges between OT and IT, and how those challenges impede the use of smart technologies. Panelists will examine 2 case studies and then engage in a moderated discussion. After a lunchtime break, we will reconvene at 1 p.m. Pacific time for our second set of concurrent sessions, with one examining a real-world application of digital twin technology, and another looking at how existing buildings can deploy smart technologies and practices to optimize operations, improve indoor air quality, reduce carbon, and improve resiliency. We have another packed day of discussions tomorrow, with things kicking off at 9 a.m. Pacific time with our second plenary session, in which Ash Awad, the Chief Market Officer of McKinstry, will moderate an executive panel discussion on the future of energy services and the built environment. The day will continue with concurrent sessions on the role of smart buildings in reducing carbon emissions and the workforce development opportunities in the expanding smart buildings market. Our program will again pause for lunch and then reconvene for our final set of 2-day panels, with one tackling the topic of returning to the workplace and how smart technologies and practices can help achieve and maintain indoor air quality, while another panel will examine how good analytics can make building data actionable for operators and managers. In our third and final day, we will host an in-person discussion on building performance data and how smart technologies can help building owners and managers in fulfilling requirements related to energy and ESG reporting. The session will be live streamed from 10 a.m. to noon Pacific time, and for those who can join us in person in the Pacific Tower, we will conclude with a lunch. It's going to be an awesome 3 days. Before we start, I wanted to run through some housekeeping announcements about virtual participation. First, you will want to use the official SBX web app and conference platform, Socio, to navigate to all of the sessions throughout the day. Each session has its own link, and they can be found under each session in the agenda. All sessions for the duration of the conference will be taking place live on Zoom. Most of the sessions will be on Zoom webinar, which is the setting we are in now. This means that as attendees, you are not visible to each other. The sponsored breakout rooms today and tomorrow will be a Zoom meeting where you can have a chance to turn on your cameras and interact. So please do so. For all your questions, please be sure to use the Q&A function. So you should see that in your Zoom tools. I'll be monitoring the Q&A during Darlene's keynote address, and we'll have time at the end for questions. All of today's sessions will be recorded, so you can watch anything you missed after the event is over. Recordings will be available online in the coming days. Lastly, I want to give a big shout out. Let me change my slide. I want to give a big shout out to our conference sponsors: Long Building Technologies, McKinstry, McDonald Miller, Puget Sound Energy, Seattle City Light, ATS Automation, DB Engineering, BOMA Seattle King County, Washington State Department of Commerce, Sky Foundry, and Alps Controls. Without their generous support, we would be unable to bring you this 3-day programming. So thank you to our sponsors. Friends, it is always an honor to be a part of this industry, truthfully. The work you do is changing the world, and it comes at a time when we need our buildings to be smarter, cleaner, and more efficient than ever before. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for all that you do. Without further delay, it is my pleasure to open this conference with the keynote address from Darlene Pope. Darlene Pope is president of Planon North America, overseeing all aspects of business operations for the world's leader in integrated real estate management solutions. With more than 30 years of experience in commercial real estate, technology, and smart building consulting, she is a globally recognized subject matter expert and visionary in the smart building industry. Prior to Planon, Pope served as global lead for smart buildings and digital workplace at WeWork, and as executive vice president, managing director, and global practice lead for JLL's smart building practice. She was also the co-founder and CEO of Core Advisors, a woman-owned small business specializing in technology consulting for commercial and corporate real estate, which was acquired by JLL in 2015. Pope is a passionate advocate for the application of leading-edge technology in buildings and is an inspirational author and speaker on digital transformation and the future of work. It is my great honor to welcome Darlene Pope.
Thank you so much, Kerry. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Very excited about this session. So first of all, thank you to the Smart Building Center for having me speak this morning. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you're coming in from all over the world. But very excited to be here at the Smart Building Exchange and share some of my insights and experience over the last, I can't believe it's been almost 30 years. My topic is going to be on the market opportunity for smart buildings. So I really want to talk a lot about the commercial aspects of smart buildings and how that's impacting all the stakeholders within the building. So with that, let me share my screen. And Kerry, if you could just confirm that I'm on the right slide here.
You got it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to spend the next hour talking about the market opportunity for smart buildings. I know over the next couple of days, you're going to have the opportunity to hear about the what and the how. What I want to talk about is the why. What are the business drivers for smart buildings? What are the various important factors that each of the stakeholders within the building hold? Also talking about the market trends. You know, what are we seeing in the real estate market? What are we seeing within the workplace? And how are those market trends impacting the decisions that you make in terms of implementing smart building technologies for your buildings? So first of all, we've got 4 or 5 major market trends that are impacting our buildings. And it applies to all types of buildings. I'm going to focus primarily on the office building market, but we'll talk a little bit about other types of buildings as well. So first of all, number one, everybody knows this, hybrid work. The COVID pandemic forced people to work from home for the last 2.5 years. I think that has changed the way we look at the workplace forever. I will point out, however, hybrid work is nothing new. People have been working in a flexible hybrid environment for many, many years. The invention of the internet 20, 30 years ago was the impetus for that we are able to work from anywhere. So the concept of hybrid work is not new. I think what's new is that COVID forced it on everyone all at the same time. And that's what really changed the workplace. So if you take a look at kind of the evolution of the workplace over time, we've seen anywhere from the early 1900s, really this evolution of what the workplace looks like. Traditional corporate offices where everyone had a windowed office, all the executives were on the outside and the workers were on the inside. We had the evolution in the 60s to more of an open office type of environment. In the 80s, we had the invention or the implementation of the cubicle, which, I don't know that a lot of people were fans of the cubicle, but it allowed for best use of space. And now we've moved into the 1990s and the 20s, where it's really more activity-based and experience-based. You'll hear this word experience and employee experience and human experience very, very often. So what did the pandemic do? Well, guess what? Workplaces changed again in a very, very short amount of time. So we now have the ability to work from anywhere. So the whole concept of the workplace has completely changed. What is the workplace? Is your workplace your home office? Is it flex space? WeWork changed the face of the office forever. The concept of co-working or flexible space, or using space when you need it, using as much as you need or as little as you need when you need it. But more importantly, the look and feel of the office is completely different. Much more of a home type of a feel, much greener, more plants and lamps and couches and rugs, and really creating a different environment and a different atmosphere that we work in. Public places, we've been working in public places for many, many years now. Again, the internet enabled that. I think, Starbucks probably sold more coffee when they were one of the first to have Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi in Starbucks locations. So working from public places is nothing new. And working from home is nothing new. I've had a home office for 23 years with 5 different companies, and I travel a lot. I go where the work requires me to be, not the other way around. So really looking at, each individual case for each building, for each company, and really understanding what's the best workplace and the best workplace design for each individual situation. But nobody can deny that the pandemic has completely changed the way that we look at the workplace. So again, hybrid work, everyone's calling this the new normal. This is not new. Hybrid work is not new. The blend of working from an office, working remotely, traveling, working on the go, whether it's on an airplane, in a hotel, at a Starbucks, we have the autonomy in many cases to choose to work wherever, whenever, and however we're most productive. So again, looking at COVID, what COVID did is it forced employers to think about the relationship between work and the workforce differently. It made employers realize that employees can actually be productive working from home, and they're happier working from home. So we really do need to start to balance the purpose of the workplace and separate that from the concept of doing work. So we're looking at, what is the purpose of the workplace? Well, that's where you go now for collaboration, socialization, learning, company culture. And even that concept changes the way that we're designing the workplace and the way that we're using the workplace. But one thing you need to realize is we were never at 100% utilization of the workplace, right? But people aren't talking about that. People, building owners, corporate occupiers weren't measuring utilization in the most case prior to COVID. And so it's really difficult to measure success of return to work strategies if you don't have a baseline to judge against. So for example, if you were at 60% utilization prior to COVID, and you're now at 50% utilization, that's actually an 83% return to work statistic. So 83% of your workforce is back to where you were pre-pandemic. So when you look at statistics around utilization, you have to compare that to where you were before COVID hit in the first place. And a lot of people don't have that baseline. They don't have anything to measure against. So now's the time to set the baseline. Now's the time to use smart building technologies, smart workplace technologies, to be able to set a baseline as to where you are now with utilization, so that you can start to trend, you can start to see patterns, you can start to see if implementing various activities or benefits or amenities is actually improving your back to work metrics. So again, hybrid work is permanent. Remote work has proven to largely be successful. We're seeing a lot of companies, attempting to bring their workforce back into the office. but I think we need to accept that 100% utilization of that office space is not going to happen. And what's also happened, a major market trend, is that employees are now demanding greater flexibility. The employees are demanding to have the ability to work from home, whether it's 3 days a week, 5 days a week, 1 day a week. Some employees don't want to ever come back into the office. So we're in a world where really employees are determining what the next normal is going to be. So if you also take a look at what that means to travel and real estate costs and sustainability, having everyone work from home, first of all, avoids that long commute into the office, and that actually contributes to better sustainability metrics. So if you look at reducing commutes, reducing business travel, that's going to help support your ESG goals. So again, you kind of have to balance getting people back to work versus your ESG goals versus your costs versus that collaboration and productivity. So there's a lot going on right now in terms of all the market factors that are impacting the workplace and getting people back to work. I'm sure you've seen in the news or on LinkedIn, there isn't a day that goes by that we don't hear about what large companies are doing to get people back to work and how they look at that hybrid work model. We have some companies that are saying, nope, we want 100% back to work. I want 100% of my workforce in the office. And you have others that are saying, we never want our people to come back to work, where it's 100% remote work. And then there are some that are kind of somewhere in the middle. And I think for the most part, most companies right now are somewhere in the middle. Most companies are still trying to figure out, what are we going to do about back to work and why? Again, we have to ask the question, why? Are we getting people back to work because we feel that they're happier and more productive? Are we getting people back to work because we feel that that's going to contribute better to the commercial aspects and the commercial benefits that it's going to give the company? Are we getting people back to work because we want better use of space? And so companies are trying to figure out what all that means to them from a business standpoint, and what's going to work best for them as they continue down this hybrid path. So again, more recent headlines, I'm sure you've seen all of these. Elon Musk tells Tesla employees, return to the office or else. If you don't come back to work, you lose your job. Time's going to tell how that plays out, but it has caused a huge backlash from employees. Even Apple, after Labor Day, has indicated that you need to come back to the office at least 3 days a week. Couple of things that are kind of falling out from that type of a mandate. First of all, they're finding that a lot of these buildings that have been vacant for the last year and a half, maybe even 2 years, don't have enough physical space to support all the people that they've hired in the last couple of years. So there is a concern around, do we have enough space? And then if you bring all those people back to work, does it change the environment and the conditions of that space from multiple factors, from a noise standpoint, from an energy usage standpoint, from an indoor air quality standpoint? And so what is the impact of all of these people coming back to work going to be in terms of the impact it has on the workforce and the productivity of that workforce? Another discussion that has come up with this, everybody has to come back to work, and owners wanting to know, what are our utilization statistics? Who's coming back? When are they coming back? What's the use of space? Is all of a sudden employees are saying, we're being tracked. We don't want to be tracked. The big brother's watching, and they're going to know where we are and when we come in and when we don't come in. And so it's kind of launched this whole concern around the ability of the employer to know where you are, when you're there, how long you're there, et cetera. So that data is really, really valuable to the employer and to the building owner and to the building operator, but it gives up a certain amount of privacy to the occupant. So throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking about the impact of these decisions on all the different stakeholders. You've got building owners, you've got building operators, and you've got building occupants. And so one technology that might be good for one is not going to be received well for another, and vice versa. So when you look at this concept of being tracked and surveillance and everything, I'm going to touch on that as we go through the presentation because I have a little bit different opinion on the value of that. A little bit more statistics that we're seeing in the market. This is from an IFMA experts assessment recently. Key findings say that about 81% of companies expect that about 26% of the workforce is going to work remotely most of the time, and that hybrid work will become the norm. Now, what's interesting is what we're seeing is that there may be a lower percentage of people that want to come back to work all the time, but the people that want to come back to work all the time want more space. So in terms of the impact on real estate, maybe less headcount, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to impact how much space that person or that company needs. And I'll give you a perfect example. We used to design office space for about 150 to 200 square feet per person. And over the last 20 years, that has continued as the office has evolved, that's continued to go down to 100 square feet per person, even down as low as 80 and 60 and 50 square feet per person. So when you look at flexible work and hoteling and the ability to have that flexibility, buildings are now being designed for 50 to 60 square feet per person. What the pandemic did was it made people realize, I don't want to sit that closely to my neighbor anymore. I don't want to sit at a desk that somebody else was sitting at two hours ago or even an hour ago. And so they want more space. So maybe less are coming back, but the people that are coming back want more space. Another trend that we're seeing is the people that are coming back want private offices again. So we're kind of going back, full circle in terms of taking away private offices and moving into open space and putting them in cubicles to guess what? I want a door and I want to be able to close the door so that I don't have distractions from noise, and so that I know that I'm going to be safe, so that I don't have to necessarily interact that closely with other people, so I can maintain social distancing. So again, let's take a look at the use of the office. What is going to entice people to come back to work? Is it going to be a work requirement from your employer? Is it going to be the social aspects of coming in? Is it going to be a collaboration? Really, what is it that makes people want to work from home as opposed to driving into an office? And I think the challenge for real estate owners and employers is going to be creating an environment that mimics the things that they like about working from home. And what are those factors? So really understanding what it is that makes people more comfortable in a home environment than in an office environment. And I think everybody agrees that coming back to work is absolutely going to contribute from a team standpoint, collaboration standpoint. Maybe we'll get to this point where it's kind of that FOMO, fear of missing out, that if we get to 40, 50, 60% of the workforce going back to work, then the people who are not coming back to work are missing out. So I do think there's going to be a little bit of a bandwagon effect as more and more people start getting in their cars and going back to the office. So what about employers? How is that impacting employers? And why does all this matter in terms of smart buildings? And we're going to get to that. But in terms of how it impacts employers, managers are saying that their company is considering redesigning the office space for hybrid work. So really taking a look at repurposing the space that they have to be able to provide the amenities and the spaces that their employees need and that they expect. So again, whether that's new recreational areas, whether that's a barista bar, whether it's some common conference space, whether it's foosball tables and ping pong tables and beer taps, and really using the space differently for the people that are there, while also trying to entice people to come back into the office. 73% of employees are saying they want the ability to work remotely. 67% of employees want more in-person work and collaboration. So we kind of have a little bit of a conflict of those two statistics, that 73% are saying that they want to be able to work from home, while 67% say they want in-person work and collaboration. So it is going to be hybrid. It is going to be flexible. And it's important for your buildings to be able to adapt to whatever it ends up being. And that's why smart buildings and the ability to have that data and understand what's happening in the buildings is so important. One thing that you're going to recognize, though, is, this has changed for Gen Z completely. If you look at the way that our kids, I say kids, that the younger generation lives, and the amenities and the features and functionality that they expect on a day-to-day basis, we do have to make sure the buildings are being equipped to support what the next generation is really expecting. And the question is that an office at all? So let's talk about another market trend, employee experience. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. And the term is kind of thrown out there loosely. What is employee experience? And I think it really combines so many of the things that we have been talking about. Employee experience in the office is about a physical environment that is enticing. As you see in the picture, more of a home type of environment. You're seeing a lot of natural wood surfaces and wood floors and carpets and fluffy couches and pillows and trees and plants and that all contributes to that enticing environment and that experience. Employees also want, as part of that experience, a healthy workplace. And recognize with COVID, the reason that people weren't coming back into the workplace is they were afraid to. They were afraid to be in contact with other people. They were afraid to touch surfaces that might contain COVID germs. They were afraid to breathe air that other people who may be sick had been breathing. They were afraid to touch doorknobs. They were afraid. If you think back to the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was in lockdown because we were all afraid to get sick. And that's a very, very real concern even today with people being afraid to come back into the workplace. So part of employee experience is around health and wellness. They want to make sure that the building is safe and the air that they're breathing is clean air, and that the surfaces that they're touching are clean surfaces. So really a lot goes into employee experience. Some of that may be from the building owner, some of that may be from their employer, but there's a lot of factors involved in creating a healthy and productive experience. So then let's look at what the employees are asking for. So again, multiple stakeholders within the building. Employees are seeing the benefits of working from home. They want flexibility. They want the space to be able to meet their needs. They want to make sure that when they do go to the office, that they've got enticing space, productive space. But they do say that they want to return to the building for things like team building, collaboration, connection to peers. And again, this applies to not just office buildings, but even think about a college campus. My older son, when he first went off to college, actually he didn't go off to college. He was one of those 2020 graduates, and freshman year ended up spending his first semester at home, studying out of his office, or out of his bedroom rather. So even applying this to a college campus, being around your peers, being around other students, being face-to-face with professors is really critical in terms of socialization and collaboration and learning. So I think the same thing also implies in the office environment. Now, here's where it gets, again, back to the commercial terms. 53% of organizations indicate that they plan to reduce their office footprint over the next couple of years. Now, that may not impact commercial real estate immediately, because as a commercial real estate owner, if your building is 100% leased and organizations are still paying their rent, may not impact you yet. However, if those organizations plan to reduce their office footprint in the future, it's going to definitely impact commercial real estate as those leases come up for renewal, which is why it's important now to start thinking about other ways to repurpose that space so that those tenants don't necessarily need less space, but they need different types of space. So another major trend, mobile first. I could talk about this for 8 hours straight and still only scratch the surface. The reason that mobile is so important is that we need to take a look at the technology outside the building that we use every single day, pretty much every second of every day, and make sure that the buildings can enable that technology inside the building. Because there's such a difference between what we use it for outside versus what we use it for inside. So let me give you a couple of examples. We all live with our mobile apps, right? I've got 2 mobile devices sitting on either side of me right now. One of them's tracking time, one of them's tracking messages, and I'm in the middle of a presentation. So we constantly have real-time data that we're reaching to our cell phones, and we're reaching to those apps to gain real-time information. And that may be social media, that may be your Facebook or your LinkedIn or Instagram or Snapchat. Social media, instant gratification, instant data, stock market, instant data in the palm of your hand. So can you imagine a situation where you got stock market information the day after? Like we get energy information. So, you may get energy information in your buildings a day later, or occupancy badge swipe data a day after it already happened. You might get energy data a month after it already happened when you get your bill in. So let's fast forward and take a look at the value of instantaneous real-time information. What is happening now? We look at weather. You need to know exactly what's happening now, be able to pull up, the radar, be able to pull up traffic on your GPS. I show a picture here of, I love this analogy, occupancy data visualized on a digital floor plan, which is a map, to be able to show you where traffic is. We have the technology to apply these same concepts within the building to show real-time occupancy. What desks are occupied, non-occupied? Is there traffic in the cafeteria right now? I would love to have that technology at my grocery store so I can pull up live, what is the traffic at the grocery store? And if I go right now, is there going to be a long line? Hotel mobile keys. I checked into a hotel over the weekend and I didn't stop by the front desk. I went to my door, I went straight to my room, and I put my phone up against the door and it opened the door. And yet in our buildings, we're still dealing with multiple cards for this, and some places even still have metal keys. I checked my son in to college this weekend, and they handed him one digital key for all of his library and food and all that. And then they gave him a metal key for his door. I almost had a heart attack. But anyway, airline check-in. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. The point here is you need to start thinking about the mobile strategy for your buildings. And there are so many different things that you can put in that mobile device and in that app, because this is how people live. I think the most important one is location-based services. And this is where the tracking conversation comes in. So location-based services, there are so many applications of location-based services within our buildings. Probably one of the #1 smart building applications that you should be considering. #1, occupancy detection and utilization. We are all walking around with an occupancy detection device in our pockets. Some of us have multiple occupancy detection devices, but those can be used for so many things. Workplace automation, checking into a room simply by walking into it, booking a room by simply walking into it. Space management, understanding where your people are right now, which floors are occupied, which ones aren't, how many people are on this floor, how many people are in this conference room. In the event of an emergency, where are my people? It is so important. And again, it's not important because it's something that we have to technology for the sake of technology. It's important because this is how we live. We live using location-based services. Can you imagine calling an Uber and the Uber doesn't know where you are? Can you imagine opening up your weather app and the weather app doesn't know the location that you're in? I mean, we give up our location every second of every day because we find value in that. The picture on the right here is one of my favorite screenshots. This is actually a picture of my son's cell phone. I had him take a screenshot of this. So I had taken my son down to college orientation. He's at Coastal Carolina in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and we live in Northern Virginia. And so this is actually a map of the East Coast between where we live and where we were. And he had gone down for orientation, which backed up right against Senior Beach Week. Now, Senior Beach Week is a week where hundreds of students had just graduated, come down to Myrtle Beach for the week. And so we had gone to orientation the 2 days before Senior Beach Week. So Saturday morning, probably around 11 o'clock in the morning, I happened to ask my son, when do you think your friends are getting here? And when are your friends going to arrive? And so he pulls up his phone and he shows this to me. And in one image, I told him, I said, you have to take a screenshot of that, because that image is every single one of his friends and exactly where they are in their journey from Northern Virginia down to Myrtle Beach. This is how our kids live. He didn't call them. He didn't say, where are you? What time are you going to be here? They know where their friends are at any given time, because guess what? Their friends give up that information and they want to share. They want to find their friends. They want to know where their friends are. So apply that within the workplace. Find my colleague, find my team. Really looking at location-based services as the way that we live, not the way that we're being tracked. So other components of it: building operations, temperature, lighting and lighting controls, predictive analytics, maintenance requests. Within the building, being able to raise a maintenance request, take a picture of something, and immediately the engineer knows who you are, where you are, what the issue is, and can respond to that based on your specific location. Location of engineers, being able to dispatch engineers in the building based on their location, so that you can send an engineer to respond to requests based on who's closest to that particular request. So location-based services, I think, is going to be huge. We use it outside the building all the time. Still haven't figured out how to get it inside the building. And it's really, really important. Blue dot wayfinding, being able to find your way around a college campus, or find your way to a conference room, or find your way to a nearest exit, the same way we use a GPS. So really endless use cases to be able to use location-based services. And then taking that same information, building information that we're already collecting, and feeding that up to multiple stakeholders. So whether that's the occupants, to be able to see real time, is this desk occupied or unoccupied? Can I book a room? Can I book a desk? What are the outstanding service requests? What do the reservations look like? Using that data behind the scenes for administration and corporate real estate to see use of space and to see trends, and really understand how the space is being used. Even taking things like energy, indoor air quality, sustainability metrics, and pushing those to a mobile app so that all the stakeholders in the building can see where you are against your metrics. So for example, and this is real information from our corporate headquarters in Nijmegen, where we do take that data and we push it to our employees, and we show them which desks are occupied. We show them what's the current temperature, what's the current, where are we against our sustainability metrics, how much energy are we using. So really taking data and looking at it differently, and pushing to those mobile apps, so that people have real-time information in the palm of their hands. And then again, all that data behind the scenes is collecting information and insights about the use of the workplace. And I'm sure you've seen lots of different graphics like this, but making sure that the workplace is safe, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of coming back to work, being able to show your employees that what your indoor air quality statistics are before they come back into work, and what areas are open and what areas are not open. Very important technology to be able to support. So another major trend impacting real estate and smart buildings is ESG and sustainability. This used to be called energy management, but now it's a much, much broader topic, really around the sustainability of the building, not just from an energy standpoint. So how can technology support this market trend? We are seeing a very, very strong push from a regulation standpoint, from a regulatory perspective, to continue to require building owners and large, corporate building owners, commercial building owners, anybody that owns a building, and large enterprise customers to report on their ESG goals, because it is extremely important to understand, you know, the energy, the carbon footprint that all of these buildings are producing. Now, one thing I'll say about energy management and sustainability is that buildings don't use energy, people do. And that there's no more energy efficient building than a vacant building. What's interesting though is during COVID, when we had a situation where all these buildings were vacant, but they were still running 100% as if they were occupied. And again, that's a reason that we have to have real-time occupancy so that we can run the buildings based on who's there and how many people are there, not just based on a time clock. But getting back to, you know, buildings don't use energy, people do. People are the ones that require air conditioning. People require lights. People require comfort. People require convenience. People require electricity. I mean, we go into our offices now, we've got a laptop and multiple screens and multiple devices, and everyone's looking for a plug, a plug, a plug, a plug. So really the most successful way to reduce energy consumption in buildings is to reduce demand. And we can also look obviously at green sources of energy, whether that's wind or solar or other ways to power that building without using fossil fuels. Now, we're talking about the commercial aspects of smart buildings, and we also have to talk about the commercial aspects of sustainability. So sustainability in itself is a business case. It's a major driver for large corporations. It impacts their brand. It impacts from a public relations standpoint. It impacts cost of operations, cost of procurement. There are so many impacts of sustainability from a business standpoint. I will say that as green energy becomes more and more affordable, in the past, it used to be that green energy was significantly more expensive than traditional energy sources. And therefore, it was a very difficult decision for a company to make because they always wanted to go with the cheapest source of energy. But that's changing now. So as the price of green energy continues to come down and as the value of sustainability to the organization continues to go up, we're going to see that leveling out a lot more. But really looking at the impact of sustainability on indoor air quality, environmental stewardship, carbon footprint, and the direct impact on workplace quality, which we've already determined is a major market trend and a demand from employees. So what does that mean from smart building commercial standpoint? Well, we're seeing that enterprise customers are spending more and more money on two major areas. And that's software for space and workplace, because as we saw what the pandemic is doing is making us realize that we have to understand the use of our space and understand whether or not we need to use that space differently. And the second one is energy and sustainability. So again, this supports those two areas in terms of being major commercial market trends that are impacting the smart building market. So another major trend, the digitization of buildings, and I could say the digitization of everything. You know, everything's digital, and you know, if you ask what is digitization, I took this from Wikipedia, and it's really the conversion of everything into a digital format that can then be processed digitally or processed by a computer and then automated. So if you apply this to buildings, I mean, we've seen building automation for the last 30 years. And now we're looking at digitization of all the different components of the building, and whether that's the physical design of the building, whether that's through, you know, AutoCAD, BIM, now looking at digital twins, taking all of the building information and data, and whether it's the physical or the operational data that we get out of those buildings, and digitizing it. And by digitizing it, it allows us to see trends and patterns and anomalies. It allows us to do fault detection and diagnostics. It allows us to see correlations between various data sets that we didn't have the ability to correlate before. So how does that apply to all the things we've been talking about? How does data digitization technology, how does that improve all the things that we need to improve? So that's insights, efficiency, safety, all the things it's going to take to get people to come back to work and to be productive. So all of that data now that you have the information around the workplace, now you can start to optimize. And we already talked a little bit about space utilization. Real-time occupancy is key. I think that, you know, a lot of companies are struggling with how to measure utilization. And there are lots of ways. We've got badge swipe data, we have network login, we have sensors, we have Wi-Fi signals. So there's multiple ways to measure occupancy. The challenge is going to be having a single source of truth for that occupancy data, because right now we probably have occupancy data, conflicting occupancy data in a lot of different places. And I think digitization allows us to really put all those in the same place and dedupe and really try to figure out what is that single source of truth that we can rely on. And then taking a look at other impacts of digitization to achieve your energy and sustainability goals and to improve. Again, you can't improve if you can't measure success against a baseline. So really important to have a baseline now so that you can see improvement over time. Also gives you insights to be able to enhance. And whether that's employee experience, whether that's enhancing indoor air quality, whether that's enhancing productivity, really looking at ways to measure and see progress over time. Most importantly, digitization allows for automation. You look at the ability to do IoT, and IoT is the Internet of Things. It's things connecting to things. It isn't just collecting data from a sensor and feeding it up to a dashboard and saying, oh, look what's happening. It is the ability to automate that process. So the data goes from one system to another system and automatically does something. And we couldn't do that without digitization. But now that we're seeing this digitization of smart buildings and smart workplace, and they're all starting to come together, we can now share data from the workplace itself into those building systems. So we have that true integration of IT and OT. And I think that's really where we are in the market, is understanding that both of those need to come together seamlessly. And then we can elevate, right? Improve performance and really take a look at improving statistics over time. So more benefits of digitization: effective use of space, sustainable, healthy workplace, reducing operational costs, being able to really measure and report on your success and continue to build on that success. And that leads us to digital twins, another large impact on the market. Digital twin markets is expected to reach 48.2 billion by the end of 2026. And so if you look at the value of a digital twin, if you've ever played Minecraft, if you've ever been immersed in artificial reality, and you see what digitization does for even gaming. So apply that same technology within the building and think of the power that we have of really creating these digital twins. Everything from buildings, parking structures, water, roadways, entire cities can be digitized and turned into these digital twins that allows us to have full life cycle representation of an asset, from design to construction to operations to maintenance. Because right now in the design process, we've got CAD, we've got BIM, and then it kind of stops when it gets handed over to operations. And this and that allows us to have that digital representation of the building from the first design concept all the way through to operations and maintenance and occupancy. So looking at all those insights, being able to run various scenarios, it really enables architects, engineers, and operators to gain insights on the operation of those buildings and to really see how those buildings are going to operate over time. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of smart buildings, because you're going to see some similarities here. So evolution of smart buildings started off with building automation, primarily HVAC, MEP. Individual smart systems started to be connected. So we had BMS, lighting, access control, elevators, but there was really no integration among those systems. So you had individual point solutions for those systems. And then with the internet and networking, it allowed us to now connect to those systems to do remote access, data and analytics, dashboards, and it allowed us to connect those systems together. So we started to see physical system integration and data sharing. This is a really old graphic, and I deliberately put it in an old graphic to show you that individual systems now being integrated created a smart building. for building maintenance, energy, and building insights. So this is kind of our traditional smart building applications with more of a real estate focus and a space focus. So again, standalone individual workplace applications. We had standalone for room booking and tickets and leasing and maintenance and visitor management with no integration among systems. But then networking, internet, remote access together. So now we're seeing digital system integration and data set sharing on the workplace side. And in a similar manner, when I showed that old picture of all the individual building systems, now we're looking at the integration of all the workplace systems and all of these things coming together so that they're all fully integrated into that single source of truth that we can then use to connect to all the building components. So looking at the new smart building, it's all of the above. It's the IT and the OT. It's collecting data from the use of the space and feeding that to the BMS. So we run the building based on real-time occupancy. It's IoT sensors collecting location-based information about what desks are occupied, non-occupied, and feeding that to the space management platform. It's all of these things coming together, and you couldn't do any of that without digitization. So now let's talk about the value proposition, because I know that's what you all logged into here today. So multiple value propositions, and it all depends upon who you are in terms of the stakeholder that you are with regard to the building. So we've got owners, we've got operators, and we've got occupants, and they all have very different value propositions for the building and for smart solutions. So let's start with the commercial real estate model. Number one business driver for commercial real estate is leasing rates, asset value. If you're an investor in an office building, your job is to make sure that you have a strong asset value and you make money off of that property. That's the commercial model for multi-tenant office buildings. So primary business drivers are going to be your leasing rates. How much rent can I get? What are my occupancy rates? Now, the occupancy rate is defined differently for a commercial office building than a corporate space. Occupancy rates in a commercial world mean what's the percent of my space that is leased? It's not necessarily the percent of my space that is occupied. Big difference there. So if you're a commercial real estate owner, you may not care as much about whether people are coming back to work as long as they're paying their rent. Again, until that lease comes up for renewal, and then you've got to start to figure out, okay, how do we create an environment in our buildings where my tenants don't start to reduce their space? So that trend has yet to really hit the market, but I think you're going to start to see that obviously over the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. Tenant retention is a big driver to make sure that again, you're retaining those tenants and also they're retaining the same amount of space. Regulatory compliance for reporting on energy, whether that's Energy Star, LEED certification, any of these sustainability metrics that they need to report on. Obviously, cost reduction is important, but think about the difference in energy costs for a building owner versus an occupant. So for a building owner, energy costs is at the top, one of the top costs of running a building is the cost of that energy. But it's just the opposite for the occupants in the building. Energy costs are at the bottom of their expense sheet. At the top of their expense sheet is their people. Personnel costs, space costs are way higher than those energy costs. So just realize that the commercial driver for the commercial owner is completely different than the occupant in the building. Even though cost reduction is getting important for both, it's not as big a factor. And obviously achieving those ESG goals. Now, look at the difference between commercial drivers versus corporate drivers. So corporate owner occupiers are looking for employee productivity solutions, health and wellness, space management, which we talked about, attracting and retaining top talent, looking for operational efficiencies within the building because every dime they save goes to their bottom line. And obviously focusing on those ESG goals for corporate sustainability reporting. So the drivers for real estate owners from a corporate standpoint are different than they are for commercial. And they're also different if you own a hospital or a hotel. So different types of buildings are going to have different business drivers. And it's really important for every smart building solution to map itself against a key business driver. and to understand why are we implementing this particular solution and how is it going to contribute to my business drivers. Now, for facility managers and property managers, these are the operators. Primary goals are going to be to reduce costs of that building, to ensure occupant comfort, and comfort includes, indoor air quality, safety, health, and wellness. So really focusing on those factors. Regulatory compliance on behalf of the owner, because recognize that the operators are not necessarily the owners. So they've got a little bit different business, commercial drivers there. Everybody's got that ESG goal though. So that is something that's common across all of these different stakeholders. And also something that's very important to facility managers and property managers is renewing the contract at the end of the contract term. So making sure that they're successful in all of these on behalf of the owner, so that they can renew their contract. And then the occupants, what are the occupants interested in? Well, they want an enticing workplace. They want a nice work environment. They want health and wellness, comfort, convenience, features, productivity, so recognize that the business drivers for all four of these stakeholders are going to be different. And so when you're thinking about smart buildings and smart workplace technologies, it's important to take into consideration all of the commercial drivers for all the occupants, and map all the different solutions against those business drivers. So just to reiterate, there is no one size fits all. Not everybody needs everything. And these are direct quotes from customers that I've worked with over the years. And one of them was a direct quote that the building owner wanted a smart building, and literally said, this has nothing to do with energy management. We want to be known as the smartest building in this city. And for them, it was entirely, their commercial driver was entirely market differentiation and higher rental occupancy. So again, higher rental rates and higher occupancy in terms of the percent of the building that was leased. So that was a completely different business objective. They said not energy management, but market differentiation. And that was a commercial real estate owner. I had another client say, we don't need to invest in a smart lighting system. Our costs are pennies. So there's no reason to invest in a smart lighting system. So they had completely different business drivers. And, I was in a situation where I couldn't sell them a smart lighting system because they were kind of right. It wasn't going to say they were going to spend more money on a smart lighting system than they were going to save in energy costs. Another client, we were talking about indoor positioning and blue dot wayfinding, and their response was, I've worked in the building for 13 years. I don't need blue dot wayfinding. There are going to be some buildings that are not right for some of these technologies. If small building, small office, maybe you don't need blue dot wayfinding. Location-based services, maybe, but the blue dot wayfinding component of it, obviously, maybe not applicable. And I think I've heard this from so many employees and employers is, our employees don't want to be tracked. They don't want Big Brother watching them. But as I mentioned, we give up our location for so many other applications. And I can guarantee if there's an emergency in the building, the people inside the building would really like for somebody to know who they are. So I think the world is going to start to think differently about location-based services in the building so that they can mirror location-based services outside the building. I had another client say, when we conducted an employee survey, they overwhelmingly wanted to have private offices. Everybody wanted a private office. And then he asked me, what was my, what should they do? What is my opinion? I said, well, I think you ought to give them all private offices. So again, different business drivers for different stakeholders. So I'm just going to summarize really quickly. COVID forced the biggest change in the way we work since the Industrial Revolution. Nobody can argue that. But now's the time to adapt and prepare for what's coming next. And that's really make sure that you've got data and information and smart buildings so you can run them based on real-time occupancy. So we don't have buildings running when there's nobody in them. And you can get all that data around use of space so that you can make sure that you create the right environment. And so that, you're creating the workplace that your employees want to come back to. So taking a look at what is the opportunity here. And I think the opportunity is tremendous. We see a business disruption event, which was COVID. and a loss of performance and profitability and productivity. And then we have to decide, what do we do now? So there's the traditional path, and you can go back to the old way of doing things, or you can take advantage of lessons learned and realize that we can make our buildings smarter. We can get better insights. We should have had this information in the first place, and we didn't. And now we can take a look at the competitive advantage of implementing those smart building and smart workplace technologies so that you do have that market differentiation, and so that you are in a competitive advantage over other companies. So if you wrap all this into one, you look at the future of work, it is somewhat unpredictable, but because it's unpredictable, you've got to employee engagement and sustainability, health and safety, well-being, digitization, all the things that we just talked about. So in summary, if you workplace technologies, it's going to ensure that you keep up with those market trends and that you're well positioned for flexibility and growth. So that supports flexibility, resilience, productivity. It really supports employee experience, which is obviously a major business driver, improves your building operational efficiencies, and unlocks data-driven decision-making. Lot of words, a lot of D words there. Anyway, that's my summary in terms of the commercial drivers for smart buildings and smart workplaces, and kind of showing you what we're seeing in terms of market trends and where the world is going. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Fantastic presentation, Darlene. It was captivating, honestly. I think this topic, of course, I'm biased. I love talking about smart buildings. COVID or wherever, what do we call it now? I don't know what we call it now, whatever we're in now. It's just such an important topic, and I think really, really fantastic discussion. We do have some questions for you. So I'm just going to dive in. How can building owners ensure that they are in line with market trends and understand what the commercial impact is for these trends?
Well, I think, first of all, understanding what the market trends are is really just, keep an eye on LinkedIn. You'll see everything that's happening in LinkedIn. No, but I think that, the overview that I just provided in terms of what those trends are and the workplace trends that we're seeing is really important. And to make sure you're prepared for those trends, you've got to have a flexible workplace. You can't have a very rigid workplace strategy. You've got to be able to adapt. And you've got to have the data to understand how your building is performing against those market trends. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is where do you stand and how are those trends going to impact you? And like I said, take a look at the way that we live, work, play outside the building. If you want to know what market trends are, take a look at the way your kids live. Look at the younger generation, look at the next evolution of the workplace that they're going to be expecting, and start to prepare your buildings for that. I keep going back to make sure that we operate inside the building the same way we're operating outside the building, because that's where the trends are coming from.
That's some good advice. There's a lot of questions and accolades coming in for you right now. I'm going to take one. So this is an interesting topic. I think it comes up a lot. Like, do smart buildings apply in existing facilities? So do you see this taking hold in new buildings or existing facilities that are being upgraded?
Absolutely. Well, if you look at, probably 98% of our building stock is existing buildings. And, I've spent the last 30 years working in existing buildings. I've had the fortune to do some very amazing greenfield new buildings. And you can do a lot more in a new building, certainly. But I think that there's more opportunity in existing buildings because the requirements are going to be the same. And any new building that goes up is going to be light years ahead of the existing building. So you've got to make sure that you're improving your existing buildings just as much. There's a lot of inefficient buildings out there. There are so many simple things that you can do that don't break the bank. And I think the biggest question I always get, or the biggest objection I always get, is that, well, smart buildings are too expensive. And my response to that, I always ask, well, how expensive is a smart building? And the answer is, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, how expensive is it to put marble in the lobby? How expensive is it? So when you're looking at renovating your properties, real estate owners know exactly how much it's going to cost to redo a space or redo the lobby or put in new elevators. But they're not doing their homework on how much is it going to cost for me to renovate and put in smart building technology. So the answer is, I don't know. Well, my response is do your homework, figure out what your use cases are, what are you trying to accomplish, and map those against the business drivers and score them. Give each one a score against your energy goals and your ESG metrics and your, all of the business cases, all of the things that we just talked about, map it out and figure out what is the business case for smart buildings. And if you can do that, then you can start to take a look at, okay, now we have the business case. Now we go out and figure out what we want to do after we figured out why we want to do it.
So there's another question here. I'm going to sort of talk it through. It comes up a lot. They're sort of asking, at what point does a building reach the smart threshold? Like how many measures should be added to call a building smart? So I think the question they're really getting at is like, is there a spectrum here? Is there a point where I can say, oh, that's a dumb building and that's a smart building?
Yeah.
Is there something you can point
question.
to? Yeah.
No, phenomenal question. And I use the analogy of a green building, right? So USGBC came up with a, pretty much a rating system for green buildings. And at this level, you're silver, gold, platinum, whatever. So we have rating systems for green buildings. We need a rating system for smart buildings. And if you ask, 20 different people what a smart building is, you're going to get 20 different responses. And so kind of the old school definition of a smart building, as I said, was really more building operations. The new school definition is everything connected and data and everything works seamlessly together. So, what is it that takes a building to become smart? I think there are definitely various levels of smart. And I think that my recommendation, again, is to start with putting down all the use cases. What are all the things that you want to accomplish? Don't start with the technology. Start with the business case, and then start with the use case, and then the business driver, and then figure out what technology you need to meet that. And also recognize smart buildings is not a one-time project. It is an ongoing journey. So start with something, figure out what is the most important thing to you as a building owner or you as an enterprise client, and figure out what do we need to solve for first, and then start to build on that. So really start with what you have, start with the data you have, and put together a roadmap. The best thing you could do is build a 5-year roadmap to smart, right? And figure out what you can do in year 1, what you can do in year 2, what you can do in year 3, because I guarantee over time, you're going to have a smart building in order to be competitive in today's market.
For sure. Duh. I think we probably have time for one more question. There's another one here from David Okada. In this fast-changing marketplace with different smart building offerings coming and going, what can owners do to make sure they keep control over their data and don't get their data held hostage when they find a software cloud service provider isn't meeting their needs?
Well, again, it's about doing your homework up front. One big trend that we are seeing is facility management, property management companies offering technologies where they're collecting data around the workplace, and that data resides within their platform. My advice there is that the enterprise client, the company itself, needs to make sure that they own their own data. They can use software to visualize their data, but the data itself is owned by the customer. And I think that's just a matter of, before you sign with any vendor, having these conversations around, where does my data reside? Who has access to my data? Is my data secure? Who owns my data? How is my data going to be used? And again, there are instances where a service provider has access to your data and uses that data for other purposes, other than the purpose that you may have intended it for. So maybe they're looking at market trends across their entire customer base globally. And if you allow them to use that data and anonymize that data for that purpose, that's great. But I think the data quality, data security, data integrity, data ownership. Those are all very, very valid conversations that you need to have before you embark with any vendor. My recommendation there is to determine what your data warehouse is, what that single source of truth is, what that core platform is where all your data resides. And that way you don't have a situation where you've got, multiple sets of data across 17 different service providers, and then you have no idea where anything is. So I think that's probably the best place to start.
Yeah, good advice. Well, I think we're out of time, although the questions just keep flying in. Thank you so much, Darlene. I think it was a really fantastic presentation, and I can tell from the audience engagement that it was really loved. And if we were all live, you'd be hearing a round of applause.
Great,
so
thank you.
Next time we'll join live. Yeah,
and I do hope you take these insights over the next couple of days, and during the other sessions, really go back to what is the commercial driver for this? What is the market impact of this? Because everything's driven by those commercial terms. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. It's how is it benefiting us, and how is it contributing to our business goals? So
yes, absolutely. So thank you. Okay, folks, the conference will now adjourn to sponsor breakout rooms for the next 30 minutes. I think my colleague Britton is going to drop a link right now. She just did it in the chat. If you want to follow that link, it'll take you directly there. But they're also visible in the Socio platform. So if you have any issues locating them, or if you have any problems throughout the conference, please go to our conference website, www.sbxconference.org, and look at the agenda page. We have contact information for people who can help. And don't forget, these sponsor breakout rooms are going to be Zoom meetings, so you can turn your cameras on, you can interact with other attendees for the conference, sponsors and one another. All right, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Darlene Pope for a fantastic keynote opening to the conference. I'm excited for the next 3 days, and I look forward to a lot more awesome content. Thank you.